Hi, everyone. This is Elizabeth and New Earth Conversations. I get to speak with Dr. Jason Miller. He's a doctor of Chinese medicine, and I'm really proud to invite him to our little show here. Thank you so much, Dr. Jason, for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Elizabeth. It's really a pleasure to be here. Honored. Thank you.
We're going to have a fun talk today, especially about healing and the nervous system. And Dr. Jason and I were just talking about how the nervous system is really key and how, as social creatures and creatures who have a very important microbiota, that we are facing an interesting challenge in our healing because we haven't been able to be very close physically to each other, and that big cultural shift is occurring. So here we are at this stage at this moment, and this is going to be coming out around mid-June of 2020. And so here we are at this stage where everything's shifted and changing, and we need to keep healing. We need to keep healing, especially our nervous system, which is getting racked with all kinds of stress. And we need to heal our microbiota. And so, Doctor, how do you see the nervous system at the moment being such a pinnacle, peak, important part of our healing at this time?
Oh, thanks for teeing that up for me. That's perfect because I really feel like the neurological network, and we just say that the central nervous system, right, of our bodies, which is this incredibly deep weave of tissue that's really it's anchored into every part of us, every organ, every gland, all through our brains, and that neural network is established, and I would say it's really deeply established inside of our digestive system. We think about the mesenteric nervous system, and that meaning this nervous system that really developed out of the place that we interface with our ecosystem, with our environment. And when you hit the word microbiota and you talk about the microbiome, this includes the virome, right? All the viruses, that what are they, 10 to the 31 viruses in our ecosystem that live inside of our bodies, and then the bacteriome, right? All the bacteria that live there, all the archaea, the fungi and yeasts, all these amazing creatures that live inside of us. They're actually communicating directly with our nervous system. There's the weave of tissue between the lumen of our intestine, that microbiota, that population, that rich bed of biodiversity that's informing us about the ecosystem around us, through what we take in, right? That is then connected to the nervous system, which is this nervous network that's literally nestled into the tissue to listen for changes and to stimulate, exchanges through other parts of the body. That central place is, I think for me, one of the most rooted places for our sort of sense of nervous stability. Like, how are we feeling as a culture, as a human race across the world? We talk about the nervous system, we talk about the word being nervous, more energy in our nervous systems, right? And we talk about agitation and anxiety and depression and just mood and mental stability and mental imbalance. And what's going on right now is all tied together in that central network. And I don't want to take away from the importance of the endocrine system, right? All those secreting glands that are connecting our emotional experience, as we basically have this this human guttural experience of emotion, right? The process of going through life as a carbon-based, organism, right? Like, it's this drawn out process that we feel and experience as we metabolize it, right? That's happening in this endocrine system, which is then responding by secreting all these hormones and neurotransmitters that are getting exchanged across the neuroendocrine system, where those two systems overlap. And then, of course, a big topic these days is the immune system, right? Which is, I mean, again, highly informed by the gut activated lymph tissue, all those tissues, like there's lymph follicles inside the intestines. There's these things called Peyer's patches, where lymph cells are gathered and lymph tissues gathered, where again, this is interaction between the microbiota, the nervous system, and then the immune system. And then this all is this incredibly complex weave, right? This interwoven network. And we think of them as discrete systems. We talk about the nervous system, we talk about the immune system, we talk about the endocrine system, right? But they're not distinct systems to the body. There's nothing discrete about it. It's just to me, it's a seamless flow of interactions, of communication, of signaling networks, just to keep everything organized and to keep us informed as an organism. But I think, you know, back to your point about the nervous system and how do we right now, how do we heal? How do we heal our nervous systems? Because if you look at the news right now, if you get your mind out there into the world, into what people are experiencing and how they're expressing their experience, it's really intense, and it's not a healthy place for a lot of people. And there's a
It
lot of
certainly
unrest,
is.
and right. And I feel like we could just, you know, it's a place to jump in, and you talking about what is really important, which is how do we heal, and how do we heal in that place, that central nervous system place? How do we create balance and harmony there? And you know, I think you made it a great little segue, or you know, jumping point by saying, you know, what's happening to our nervous systems right now as we've kind of been isolated, as we've been sort of separated from loved ones, and a lot of us are in, you know, in these lonelier or alone, more alone situations, especially, you know, our elder population, a lot of folks that already were challenged. And when you start looking at what the health impacts are on the nervous system of not having close contact with human beings, oh my God, it's profound. You know, it's really profound, and we need that. We need that intimacy. We need communication. We need connection. We need, you know, loving speech. And you know, I talk about medicine, and when I talk about medicine, I say everything is medicine. The way you choose to use your words, right? The note you play on the guitar, the food you make for your family. I mean, that it's all medicine. And we're not able to give each other the good medicine that we need right now when we're being separated in this way. And you know, I don't know what the solution is right off, you know, as we just start this conversation, but I think it's a great place to kind of get that dialogue going about what we can do right now to start to create more harmony. And I think about like the blue zones around the world, you know, looking at where people live healthily and they live for, you know, long time. They have high quality of life and longevity. And a lot of what they share in common is that they live close together, they live in families, and they eat food together. It's not even about what they eat so much about how they eat, how they appreciate their food, and how they appreciate each other. And I think that's, you know, that's one of the central and most important pieces of right now, I think, of healing. And when I ask my guides, and I ask, you know, like for instance, the I Ching, and do a reading about what the way forward is, the answer I get is union. It's togetherness. It's intimacy. You know, so there. That's
So spectacular. And I had these visions as you were talking about the ancient, you know, the lineage speaking to us through us, saying, you know, build your system, connect with the earth, get barefoot, get your bare hands in the dirt, connect with the animals and the plants. This is where the biome is. You are not separate from it. You're not separate from the ecobiome of the earth. And as you reconnect to that, that's going to make it easier for union to occur in the person, in the flesh. It'll make it easier because we'll be healthier, we'll be happier, and we'll be more able to sustain deeper connection in person. And so it's a cycle, it's a circle that, you know, if you want to be able to connect in the human flesh cultural sense in a society of connection, it must be in harmony with the earth, and the microbiome is going to be intimately connected to that. And we know that in anthropology, especially as you look at the microbiome of the hunter-gatherers who are barefooted on the earth every day connecting to the planet, and then the microbiome of somebody, say, in New York City, and it's like night and day. You've got thousands of varieties of bacterium and this biome of richness with the people who have that intimate connection to the planet, and then this very deep lack and sterilization of the biome in a more modern society. Now I always like to say, Dr. Jason, that the house is this strange new environment that never existed before.
right.
It's up off the ground. It's full of carpet. It's full of dust mites. It's like heaven for dust mites. They're so glad we've created this random weird thing called the house. It's full of chemicals, paint on the walls, you name it. And then there's no humidity to create the natural filter. And that is not a biome that is a sterilized, weird, very unusual place that hasn't existed before, and here we're shoving ourselves into this, and that is not how we evolved. We didn't evolve that way. So what are your thoughts then on this cycle of creating a better biome in order to get back together in union, and what comes up for you around that as a possibility for healing?
I got a lot of thoughts and images as well when you were talking. And, you know, I come from the background, of course, I started out studying science. I was really passionate about, I wanted to find out what's the truth, you know, what's the answer? Like, what is it all about? And I dug into science really deeply, right? And I found that every time I dug deeper and deeper, I found that it was another model that was an approximation. And there was no absolute truth. And everything broke down the smaller you looked at it, the finer your vision became, the more, you know, refined your look was, the more you realized that, oh, wow, you know, all models are approximations. All models are wrong. They're just there to try to help us understand a process. And if it's useful, that's great. And then I branched from there into ecology, really into an ecological perspective on, you know, like how we do permaculture and live in harmony with nature. I knew that that was the best way to solve our problems and how to not be a part of the problem. And then my calling to kind of be, you know, a medical practitioner to help people brought me back to Chinese medicine and this ancient Taoist perspective, really the ecological perspective on health and medicine, what I call it. And I think that for me, the ecological perspective is something that we've lost as we've ventured into the microscope, you know, and we've really looked deeply into the microscope and we've lost ourselves in it. And my whole message is let's get back out of the microscope and let's get this big view. Let's get what I call the macro ecological perspective versus the micro rational. And let's bring it back, you know, so that we get this patterned, cyclical, you know, relationship oriented view. And then we can reapply that to the microscope. But we got to make sure that we keep that, you know, and hold that in our space. And when you start talking about the house and you start talking about, you know, microbiota, and we talk about human culture, I think that some estimates are that a person in New York right now has the biodiversity that's about 10% of what a hunter-gatherer person might be. And maybe that's even, smaller than that if you consider what people used to, if we could have measured somebody who was living on this planet 100,000 years ago, for example, or even, 2,000 years ago, because things have changed so much. And the thing I wanted to convey about the nervous system and about its connection to the immune network, the immune system, and then to the microbiota. And if you think about this, in this model, the immune system is basically a shepherding and farming operation that shepherds and sort of farms and works with the microbes and keeping them, sort of like, hey, these are the ones that are helpful. They're doing good things. We'll kind of support them and we're going to nurture them and corral them over here. And these guys are a little out of control. So we're going to kind of like shut them down a little bit and kind of get some of them out of here. And this is happening all the time in this dynamic interplay, right? And the nervous system is getting tons of information about it. And then we look at this, if we have 10% of the biodiversity now, we're only getting 10% of the information that we need to inform the whole network, what's going on in the world. How do we interact with it? How do we prevent ourselves from getting diseased? And how do we maintain health? How do we stay strong and stable and harmonized? That depends on that biodiversity. And you're talking about a really important piece, which is that, well, where do the microbes live? Well, they live in our environment, not in our house. They live out in the garden. They're on the carrot that you pull out of the ground, right? You don't clean it off and scrub it and get the skin off. No, there's little bits of dirt, and little like mycorrhizae, and there's little tiny bits of bacteria and things on there that are all going to come as a part of that biodiverse network. As you take that food in and get little bits of that soil, you're actually informing yourself. You're actually strengthening yourself. And the strength that comes from biodiversity is undeniable. There's a new field, right? Neurogastroenterology. It's the study of the nervous system, how it relates to the microbiota. Incredibly beautiful stuff that's coming out of this, and the scientific papers, the research is vast and very informative. It starts to get into the vagus nerve and really the generation of our hormones and neurotransmitters, and how much of what we are, who we think we are, how we feel, our mood, our well-being comes from the gut and is sent as messages up into our nervous system. What we would say afferent flow, right? Afferent from the gut back to our brain along the vagus nerve as one example of a major, thoroughfare for nervous communication. That almost all of that energy that comes in our experience is coming from the gut and going to our brain to inform us. And then we interpret that, right? And then we filter it, and then we put it into language and culture and history, and we make a story out of it. But at the experiential level, what's happening here in our guts, I'm touching myself in my abdomen, right? And so all the ways that we can increase biodiversity, inform ourselves about the ecosystem and about others and about how it all works, the stronger we're going to be. And obviously right now we're not just all jumping into huge gatherings, but festivals, transformative festivals, music festivals, big concerts, big gatherings and conferences where people come together are also places that we're sharing that biodiverse information and, cross-pollinating each other, And my belief is that that's the way to create the most strength in our, in our bodies, our physical bodies, but also in our emotional bodies, right? Because we come into contact with different people's opinions, different people's perspectives, which then deepens our, our perspective and, challenging us, right? There's that old proverb, you never really know someone until you fight them. And I don't mean like taking out your sword, but like, hey, I don't see it that way. Let's talk about that. And then, you get into it with them, and then that you come reel back from that and you look and go, oh, I just learned something. I just learned something about you. And now I understand where you're coming from, and you understand me. And now we both just grew. But I think that kind of thing is happening at all these levels, down to the microscope. And it's, and it has the capacity to create an incredible strength across our whole culture, across our whole world, as far as that biodiverse network goes, the soil, the air that we breathe. And like you said, the house is not only a sterile environment from not having the microbiota, but it's also a place that's full of toxins, right? And toxins that we have to metabolize, because we've made choices, right, at high levels of decision making, government level choices, where we've decided to grow food not because of its nutritional value, but because of its, economic value, right? It's always got the biggest head. It doesn't, it lasts through the year. It doesn't have, it doesn't get affected by pests, but it doesn't have any nutrition either. So what? It's big and it looks good and people buy it. So we have that problem. And then we have all the things that we've been dumping into the ecosystem. Like you said, paints, carpets, all the things that are off-gassing, right? All the pesticides and hydrofluorocarbons, the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, BPA, all the plastics and the endocrine disruptors. I mean, these things are driving our metabolic networks into, failure, into this, we just can't adapt. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the resilience, what I call the adaptive reserve, which, and if you think about it in terms of like a visual, right, we have sort of a dynamic range that the human body is able to adapt within, like of stressors, and if we're within that, the body has this capacity to be able to kind of pull us back around the midline and keep us in a place of harmony. But once the toxicity becomes too high, combined with the nervous stress, combined with the lack of biodiversity, suddenly we're very quickly outside of that dynamic range, and then the body can't on its own pull itself back in, and now we have dis-ease, right? And some people don't have the genetic predisposition, they don't have really the machinery, the enzymes to denature these chemical toxins effectively, right? And so then they end up with a lot of intermediary metabolites that go through their bodies and wreak havoc hormonally, leading to cancers. I mean, huge connections to, to chronic disease, autoimmunity, everything else. So we know we have all these factors that are kind of pressing against us. And then with what's going on now, you've got a global pandemic, and you've got race wars, and you've got all this stuff that's coming up. And again, to me, it comes back to the simple things: breathe fresh air, be in the sun. The sun is a lot more than vitamin D, it's a lot more than ultraviolet light. It is the center of our solar system, right? And it's amazing. I'm like, oh my God, we have this space mind now, right? We have this star, we don't just have the earth, plant, eco mind, and the microscope mind. We have this space mind. And so every day for me, I'm thinking about, here I am walking on the earth, and at the same time, here's these planets circling around me, and here's the sun in the middle, and here's these stars all around, right? And I know that in my mind, like that's the story that I'm living. That's the vision that I've seen, right? And that's what I hold in me. And at the center of that is the sun that's just radiating this incredible energy, right? And I feel like inside the earth is that energy. And I feel like we are like the sun, the star children walking on this earth. That energy is alive. Like the sun has implanted its seed in the earth, and she has held it, and we have come out of it, and we are here like sun, starlight looking, right? And when I think about that in the galaxies that we can see, like, oh my God, what an incredible gift. What a wow, this is it. This is us. We're this little, we're doing this. We're consciousness and we're happening right now. And this is what we're doing with it. How do we change that? How do we wake up? Like, oh my God, if we, I mean, we're in a little teeny island in the middle of this vast ocean of what, you know, like space, vacuum. Wow, we could create anything that we can vision, that we can imagine. And this is where we are, you know?
We're taking it back. It's a different age of empowerment. And I'm seeing teachers like you stepping forward with your heart, not just your brilliant mind, but your heart, and saying, hey, we're all equals. We got to do this together.
Mm.
It's, you're right. It's unity. It's galactic consciousness. And knowing with that galactic consciousness how small we feel, yet how vitally creative we are. And you're right, we're with the sun and the moon too. People
Mm.
fear the moon. Even traditionally, there's a lot of fear around the moon. But the tides and the cycles that these two beautiful celestial bodies have created, as well as the celestial influence that is becoming more and more clear, just how important it is, how, for example, Jupiter's holding our solar system together. And we wouldn't be here without Jupiter, among all the other intricate little trillions of details that had to get set up for life, for this kind of consciousness to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And how fabulous these bodies are, how precious they are, how precious DNA is. And now, this fuller realization how precious our heart mind and our gut mind, our biome is to the whole, to our wellness, to our future. So we're really alluding now at this point in our conversation to the future and the baby steps that we have to take. Breathing, mindfully breathing, mindful breathing, sunlight, light of all types, except the kinds that mess up your head. Fluorescent lights.
Right, right.
You know, and then, you know, creating different kinds of creation, being able to be creative.
Creative expression.
Yeah, exactly. And feeling cut off from other people stagnates creativity. It stagnates the ability to express yourself, even if it's just you having a conversation. And now we've kind of jammed our creativity and our connection into this thing called the internet, and we've missed out on the true internet, the real internet, which is intuition, which is the natural psychic ability of the human, which is also by science becoming more and more clear just how powerful it is. The connection to the plant world and our consciousness, that's also becoming more apparent as science takes a grander, more novel look at how we're actually built and how these compounds in the world work with our bodies in their complexity, not in the derivatives of them, not in the, well, I'm just going to pull this one chemical out and see what happens attitude, but the wholeness of it. And that's holistic thinking. It's mindful thinking. And so from there, now we're kind of building this foundation of solution, of healing. What else can we be doing? What else can we do for ourselves first, and then, of course, our communities, to support us as we evolve, but then also the vulnerable who are much more isolated than the average person, and probably more ill because of, or incapable of becoming well because of the environments they're in. I'm just kind of thinking about steps in the moment. What comes to mind? What kind of bursts forth in your creative and scientific mind?
Well, I would say, you know, I went into the vitamin D, the sun, and the bigness of the sun and what it represents, and that sunlight and the importance of it on our skin. You know, and just like there's a lot of people out there living in fear of the sun because it causes cancer. You know, I spent most of my time studying cancer and helping people with cancer. That's what I do. You know, and it's a deep, deep work that I'm involved in. And I'll tell you that the sun is not the cause of cancer, but you know, getting sunburned, not having a relationship with the sun, going out there and being careless, yeah, that it can burn you. Looking directly into the sun will burn your eyes. Like, we know you can only take so much of the sun, and I always think of, like, God is so beautiful, you can't even look at God's light, or you'll be, you'll just die, you'll be blinded, or whatever. And I always think, well, that's kind of how I feel about the sun, not that the sun is God, but the sun is sort of like a God for us in this
Yes.
incarnation, right? That I can't look at it, and I have to be respectful about how much I get of it, because if I get too much, it does damage me. It damages my skin. But getting none of it is just as damaging. So it's a matter of getting just the right amount of sun. And actually, most of the research will show you that a good tan is the best protection you have from getting skin cancer from the sun. So we have to be careful. Again, read through all this information, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of disinformation now. You said the internet, it's this place where all information can just get out there, and it's streams of it. And the psychic component that you mentioned is really beautiful, because we can actually see how that connects through the internet, right? It's another medium that I was the other day with things were going on in Minneapolis, and I grew up in Minneapolis, and my brother and my family are there, and my brother has a business, Dangerous Man Brewing Company in Minneapolis, and he's very community minded. And so as I'm reading about George Floyd, I'm in this, like, wow. And then I thought of my brother's, like, wow, man, I just wanted to think, God, man, I love you, bro. And then my phone's ringing, right? And it's his, he pops up, Rob Miller on my phone, and I'm like, again, just why did he call me at that exact moment when I was thinking exactly about him? Just those reinforcing moments that you're like, okay, good, just remembering, the signs show up if you're aware. I always think about wizardry and magic isn't that you're doing something special, it's that you've become aware of how special what's going on around you is. It's like, wizardry, like, right? Anyway, so those thoughts just popped in my mind, and thinking about what we can do, just getting sunlight, getting fresh air, keep the windows open. We're getting into the summertime in the Northern Hemisphere. We want to keep fresh flow. Don't isolate yourself. And, being outside is the ultimate. And for me, being in nature and like doing things like just spending a moment with a flower, or watching a group of ants and how they work on they're around a little pool of water. What are they doing? And just lose your mind and just sit with them, and just how are they functioning just as life, and appreciating each little flower that's growing, and just take that time, because like you said, breathing deep, when you get into that place where you're not thinking about the world, you're not looking at the internet, you're not dwelling on the pain and suffering in the world, then you start to calm down. Your nervous system actually starts to settle. And settling our nervous system is probably one of the most important places I think that we need to work, because, like I said, it drives all those other processes. So how do we do that? Well, it's like when a baby is with her, her mother, and just sitting, just against her skin, right? Immediately the nervous system is calm. Everything's just like, the heart rate goes down, everything. So for us, it's that way too, and we're together. You can even be with your animals. I think that having animals around is really good too. And they share a lot of, they get in the dirt and they play, and they bring that into your house. They bring that around, and I want that. I love that. The whole idea that you just sleep on the floor. I remember who it was who said it. Drink vinegar, and and just eat vegetables, eat plants, and eat dirt. Like that's like the basics to just being healthy, just to be strong. And for people that are isolated, especially when you're in a space where, let's say you're in a care facility, and you have limited access to the world outside, you have limited access to sun. I think one of the things you can do is not look at the television, not look at the internet. You can read books, you can look at art, you can do art. And just, even if you haven't done art before, if you haven't tried, but just expressing yourself through an instrument, through trying to play a note on something, just one note. I mean, just plucking a string on a guitar and feeling the resonance of that, it can be incredibly inspiring, the vibration of just an instrument with all that intention in there. It's like someone cast a magic spell to make that guitar, right? And you can just click a note, and there it is. Bing, wow, and so like, and then evolving, playing an instrument, and then things like doing exercise. I mean, of course, just like moving your body. We have, every historical account of human beings across the world has been that we have a very diverse array of activities that make up our lives, and that we move, like we're not sedentary. And sitting, as we know, is a destroyer of human health. Sedentary life and sitting, and it's even more than just sitting. Like, you can't just go like sit all day in a cubicle and work, or sit in front of a television and then exercise for a half hour and undo that sitting. We've seen now that that doesn't work. It helps a little bit, but you need to break up that time while you're sitting. You need to get up every short period, every 45 minutes. Remove yourself from your keyboard. Get your arms out of that position. Pull your face out of the screen. Don't pick up your phone. Go outside. take some breaths, do some jumping jacks, shake your body, move around, do a qigong or tai chi exercise. Just jog in place, do a HIIT workout, a high intensity interval training workout. And then go back to what you're doing, and go back to your computer. And then next time go back and do it standing, or do it in the garden. Why are you at work right now? Most of what we do is being able to be done on the internet. No reason for you to have to be at work in your cubicle. You could be at home and you could be out at the picnic table in your backyard where the birds are chirping, and you could just stop and put down your keyboard and listen for a moment and say, hey, let's just listen to the birds. And when you listen to the birds, it's that simple thing, just listen to the birds. How many moments have I just listened to the birds and been completely blown away, in awe of the magic, the amount of layers of communication, the signaling, and oh my, it's incredible, right? And just to be able to have that moment to take that in is so healing for us. It does something to our nervous systems. It calms the nervous system. And in my work with cancer, one of my number one places I work is calm nervous system. I mean, for everyone, whether you're trying to prevent cancer, you're in a deep, deep place with stage 4 cancer, you need to heal, or you're in early, stage 1 breast cancer that's facing surgery and other things. We got to calm it down, and when we're calm, we make good decisions, right? When we're calm, we have clear thoughts. When we're calm, we can say medicine words, right? It's when we get agitated, we can't process things, and then we say things that we don't want to say and what we don't mean, and then it can be hurtful. But for those people that are in those isolated situations, I also was thinking how cool it would be if some of us could do things to help them, like even just sending letters to places, or sending pieces of art there, or sending music they can listen to, and tapping in a little bit and finding out, hey, at that center, what do those people love? What would they love to hear? I know I used to go, there's a local kind of like a partial assisted living, situation here, but people have their own, individual places, and then they get like meals taken care of and things and different levels of care. But I would go in there with a band I was playing with. It was called Trine. It was a little trio. It was live cello, drums, and voice. And we just go in and play for them. And the people just loved it. It was so beautiful. And I know now with where things are with, transmission and things, we have to be careful. But, if you look at the wearing of masks, it's much more efficient to wear a mask yourself and prevent giving whatever your stuff is to other people if they're at risk, if they're immunocompromised, if they're the elderly. You do a lot of protection, you wearing a mask, a lot more than them wearing a mask around you. That's important for people to know. And so, even just in general, just being courteous and thoughtful of other people, I think is one of those places that we can do a lot of healing right now too. I think it's easy for us to get upset. It's easy for us to feel like we want to resist control, we want to resist censorship, we want to resist, sequestration. But at the same time, we need to act in ways that are yin, that are feminine, that are ways that are receptive and responding, not ways that are telling and pointing and showing everybody else what's right. That's not going to work right now. And so it's it's us taking that action of responding to other people's needs and being aware of what they need and what's going to calm their nervous system down. If it's going to calm someone down if I wear a mask, I'm happy to wear a mask. But that, and the reasons why we're doing things is really important. So I know I kind of went on a few tangents there, but I'll bring it back to you, and just those are some ideas that I have. I've got a lot more too.
Oh, I know it. I love that the intent, coming at it with good intent. There is a calmer, softer, gentler way to respond to people, what their needs are, and then what came in actually was around calming yourself. And for people who can't be around other people very easily, I work with a lot of empaths. And these empaths, their nervous systems are on constant fight or flight, basically. And it's really hard for them to be calm. And at one point earlier this year, I found myself having a difficult time calming my body down and facing my own fight or flight PTSD type stuff. Mm. And I always used to make fun of tree huggers, but I live out on a farm at this point, and I have all these trees, and I have this friend who came to visit, and she would get so into hanging out with the trees like they were people. And I thought it was kind of silly. And then one day I had like this horrible migraine, and nervous system just off the hook, adrenal burnout. and I wandered out in the yard, and I was desperate. So we have a little trail we've built. We were so lucky to be on land. We have this trail, and this one tree that was just leaning just enough that I could lean up against it and actually put my head on the tree. I took a few deep breaths, and I just kind of melted into the tree, and I'm not kidding, all my pain was gone in a minute. And it almost kind of freaked me out. And now every day I have this ritual twice a day. In the morning, I go on my walk, I go lean into the tree, I thank the tree, I get all my stuff. It takes it, and it's so physical. I'm a little speechless, honestly, at how physical it really is, but it makes sense. The tree naturally is a conduit, which is why lightning hits trees. It's full of water, it's full of consciousness, it's deeply rooted into the earth and the water system, it's reaching out into the sunlight. This thing is what we should look like. And trees themselves are in a one mind, one heart, one body state. And that's what humanity is going to end up as. We're going to end up one mind, one heart, one body if we do this right. And with the earth. And now I don't think it's funny anymore. I think it's amazing. I think it's magical and true. And probably a smart scientist will want to come along and start studying this tree hugging thing, because for real, having so much pain in my body, I have weird problems with my body, rare diseases and all sorts of things. That is a measurable result that I can depend on. And it's not hugging a person, it's hugging a plant. But it works, and it's grounding, and it's calming. It instantly calms the nervous system. So there's something about nature where if we can't be around the people right away, there's the animals and the plants and the physicality of the earth, and crystals too. People have a lot of amazing experiences with the crystals as well. And Nikola Tesla talked about them being intelligent. So I'm also thinking about those who can't be around people in general. Maybe they're immune compromised, or maybe they just really have a hard time being around other humans, because they exist. But all the different ways that we are being supported in this unity, it doesn't necessarily mean we end up physically in person with other people, but it will lead to that. It will make us stronger and more able to. So an empath can say, all right, I'm going to go to the grocery store, and I'm going to be around the people, and I'm going to go do this public thing. And then I know that when I get home, I have this tree in my yard, and we have a relationship, and I know that this is going to help me to get grounded again, to feel comfortable again in my own skin. It's so beautiful and so wonderful. What other ideas kind of come up around that? I'd love you to pack them in.
Well, I was going to say one thing that, we talk about how, a tree is like, we call it a sessile autotroph, right? It's basically this doesn't move. It just lives rooted in the earth, right? And it's extending its leaves to communicate with the sun, right? And it's getting all this energy, the energy from the sun, this radiant galactic energy that's transforming into itself, right, into consciousness. And at the same time, it's pulling up from the earth all the roots, and it's connecting that earth sun thing we talked about earlier, right? And what's really amazing is that in the soil, it's not that the tree itself is actually sitting in the soil with its roots just sitting there drawing up nutrients. It's actually sitting in a network of what? Of bacteria and yeast and fungi and archaea and viruses, and this mycorrhizal network that's incredibly complex, that allows that tree to interface with the soil, so that all those components are transforming and integrating that interface so that the tree can live, right? And so we're right back to that microbiota again. And we think about us, we're not that different. It's just that we have taken the soil, right, our foods, all the things we take in, and we put it in our bodies, and then we walk around with it. And then if you look at inside our digestive tract, we have all these columnar epithelial cells inside there, right? These villi that are these long extensions that are like roots. They look like roots. and they're in the soil. But the soil is just moving, it's moving through us, and then what's happening there? It's covered in all the mycorrhizae and all the bacteria and all the, all those microbiota that live there to transform that soil so that we can digest it and bring it in, right? Because when we digest something, what do? We first break it down from big pieces to smaller, then we break it into tinier pieces. Then we have to absorb it, through all these special little processes and the layers of our intestines, and then we have to assimilate it into ourself, right? And that whole process in the human body is a little different than the plants, but I just like the way that we've basically just taken the same step. It's just that, like, the plants are just a different layer of it, where they're basically just creating chemicals all the time to defend themselves, and they have all these incredible mechanisms for interacting with the environment and the ecosystem that make them special as trees. But we're not that different from them. We think about how much DNA is there and how far there. I'm not a plant, but like you said, like being with plants, right? Being with plants can be a great, I think like you said, even like having plant pets, like a pet plant, especially for kids, like here we go, we're going to have, plant some sunflowers, and then you're going to have those, and you're going to be with them every day and watch them grow. And you could even sing to them. And we've seen that, in the botany of desire, right? That when you give positive music to plants, they grow more efficiently, they grow faster, they grow, they have bigger fruits and everything. So the kids can actually work with their plants, or people in these, like isolated places, having plants in your environment is going to be really important. And you made me just really go deep into that appreciation with your story, about the healing that occurred. And I think one of the things I think about in medicine is just the whole idea of the placebo, which the word happens to mean, it's basically around, using a pill that has active ingredient versus a pill that doesn't. And so it has this idea of like tricking people, and it's like this tricky thing, this placebo thing, this weird effect that happens. But I really like to think of it as the healing power of the mind, and that when we see a certain image, something that interfaces with our story, that we change physiology and we can heal ourselves in amazing ways, remarkable ways, just by perceiving something in a different way that integrates in our story in a way that's different, right? And so, like, for you walking up to that tree, it doesn't even, like, what I'm getting at is, it doesn't even require that the tree did anything to you. It requires that you acknowledge that the tree is healing, that the tree is there, that you are healing with this tree, and suddenly all kinds of amazing things can happen. And in the modern placebo research, we know that you don't have to trick anybody. You can tell people that it's a placebo. You can tell them that, and then let them go and take the medicine, and they still have the effect. Still 30% of all the amazing medicinal effects from a therapy would come from that healing power of the mind. And I think getting our stories straight, and what I mean by that is not that there's one overarching story. And when you said one world, one heart, one mind, it made me think, yeah, but how does that happen? It happens through each person having the freedom to be their unique, expressive, individual self, and to believe the story that they believe is true, because there is no absolute truth. There is no ultimate story. There is, and every story, every stream of media you stand in, every place that you get information, everything, it's all just information, and it can be words, it can be internet, it can be sun, it can be plants, whatever. It's all information. We're taking it all in, and we're storytellers, right? We name things, we're namers. And that's beautiful. And we do that in incredible ways all over the world. We name everything. But there's a place that I was getting at before that, where before all the naming, there's an awareness, right? There's this presence that we have with that deep breath, with that settling into knowing that I am one heart, one mind, not because I'm trying to think that we're all one, but because I let go of any preconceptions about how it's supposed to be, or who it all, what it's all about. And I was just in my place of acknowledging that I am conscious awareness. And in that moment, there was no naming of anything. You weren't Elizabeth Wood. You're just this beautiful, radiant, source of light that I'm taking in. Just like the rose in my garden. It's not a rose. It's this incredible, complex mystery, right? That's just unfurling this beautiful smell and this beautiful sight that I'm taking in as a perceptive, conscious entity, an organism, a structure, wherever I am, that I get to have this process. And in acknowledging that also, that we've talked a lot about digestion and about, the nervous system and its connection to actual material stuff, but we are actually going through an emotional digestion every moment of every day. You describing being an empath and going into a store, for example. In these times, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of experience there. What does that person think about me? How do I think about them? What stories are they running that they think are real, that are they applying to me or to others? And how am I perceiving it? And all that is going on. And then we have experiences too, like traumas that happen to us that we have to break down into smaller bits, get them refined enough that we can actually absorb them, assimilate those experiences, and then metabolize them, and then break them down into what we want to excrete, right? We're going to get rid of part of it, and we're going to take the rest of it, integrate it into who I am. But that process is really hard, and a lot of things are really hard. Someone dies, someone gets killed. You know, on the day that George Floyd, the whole thing started, my godson, Taliesin Namkai-Meche, who was killed on the Max 3 years ago in Portland, was the same day. It was that May 26th, 3 years ago. And so for me, it was like really, really profound. And for me, the emotional experience of losing him in this world, as much as I know his actions and what he did, sparked an awakening of consciousness across the world. And I knew that he realized his destiny in that moment, and he knew and he met it. And that's beautiful. And I can go, oh my God, yes. But at the same time, in my body, I'm like, oh, that's my buddy. Like, my God, you know? And so I cried and I go through it. And we have to be on both sides of it. We have to metabolize this life experience, you know, physically, emotionally, cosmically, you know? And it's all got to happen together. And we need to help each other do it. And it's a lot. And wow, yeah.
Thank you
Thanks
for
so
this.
much.
You are so radiant, and
Oh,
you're radiant light, and there's so much presence here around me and our conversation, and your godson too, and all of it. And this is so precious what you've given us today, Dr. Jason. Thank you so much for your heart space and this light and this beautiful rainbow of knowledge and being and wisdom and the embodiment you're into. The brightness, the lightness, the passion is apparent. So with that, thank you. How can people come and connect with you, sign up to get your emails and whatnot? What's your website?
It is dr for Dr. Jason A. Miller.com. JASONA Miller.com. That's my
Perfect.
website.
Thank you. Yeah. And then people will be able to connect, and Dr. Jason is so out, he's out there for you. He's a friend of humanity. He's a friend of the earth.
Mm.
And we thank you so much, all of us, especially me. Namaste to you, my friend. Thank you.
Oh, no, really, it's my pleasure, my honor. Thank you for being here and for holding the space.
Beautiful.